There are moments in global politics when the public story and the real story become two completely different things. What people see on their television screens is the official narrative, press conferences, statements from governments, carefully crafted language designed to make every side look strong. But underneath those statements, underneath the headlines, something else is happening. And right now in the Middle East, those two realities are drifting further apart every single day. Because behind the official language about strategic operations and defensive measures, something far more complicated is unfolding. A conflict where both sides claim strength, a conflict where neither side wants to appear weak, and a conflict where the word ceasefire means something completely different depending on who is saying it. Over the past 10 days, the world has watched one of the most dangerous military confrontations in recent history unfold. Airstrikes, missile attacks, drones crossing borders, oil markets shaking, military bases placed on high alert, and governments issuing statements every few hours trying to control the narrative. But the most revealing moment of this entire crisis did not happen on a battlefield. It happened on television, because sometimes the most important signals in geopolitics are not sent through missiles or aircraft carriers. They are sent through words, and one sentence delivered during a televised interview revealed more about the current balance of this war than 100 military briefings. The message was simple. Iran would not accept a ceasefire. Not a temporary one, not a short pause, not a tactical break in the fighting, only a permanent end to the conflict. For many people watching the situation from the outside, that response seemed confusing. After all, Iran has been under continuous bombardment, military facilities targeted, infrastructure damaged, economic pressure rising. So the obvious question appears immediately. Why reject a ceasefire? Why turn down a chance to stop the bombs? To understand that answer, you have to step back and look at how each side views the situation. Because in modern warfare, perception can matter as much as firepower. From Washington's perspective, the conflict was supposed to follow a familiar pattern: rapid strikes, overwhelming force, strategic shock. The idea behind this strategy has been used many times before. Strike fast enough, strike hard enough, and the opposing government begins to crack from internal pressure. Political fractures appear, leadership becomes unstable, eventually the system collapses. At least that is the theory. In practice, things rarely unfold so cleanly, and in this case, the reaction was immediate. Instead of silence following the initial strikes, the region lit up with activity. Missiles launched across multiple directions, drones entering airspace, defense systems activated throughout the Gulf, military bases placed into defensive posture. The situation transformed almost overnight from a targeted operation into a regional confrontation. And once a conflict expands geographically, controlling it becomes much harder. Energy markets noticed immediately. Oil traders began reacting within hours. Insurance companies raised risk levels for shipping routes. Energy analysts started calculating worst-case scenarios, because one narrow stretch of water sits at the center of this entire crisis: the Strait of Hormuz. Nearly 1/5 of the world's oil supply passes through that corridor. Every tanker moving through those waters represents millions of barrels of energy supply. If that route becomes unstable, global markets respond instantly, and they did. Prices climbed, volatility increased. Financial analysts began discussing supply disruptions that could ripple through the global economy. This economic pressure is one of the reasons ceasefire discussions began appearing so quickly. Wars in the Middle East do not stay local for long. They move through supply chains, through shipping lanes, through energy markets. Eventually, they show up at gas stations thousands of miles away. And when that happens, domestic political pressure begins to build. But while economic pressure was building on one side, strategic calculations were forming on the other. From Iran's perspective, the situation looks very different. Iranian leadership believes that accepting a temporary ceasefire would simply reset the battlefield. In their view, previous negotiations have followed a pattern. Diplomatic talks begin, tensions temporarily decrease, and then strikes happen again. Whether that perception is accurate or not almost doesn't matter, because perception shapes strategy. If leaders believe negotiations only delay the next attack, they will treat ceasefire proposals with deep suspicion. And that is exactly what appears to be happening. Instead of seeing a ceasefire as an opportunity to de-escalate, Iranian officials are framing it as a tactical pause that benefits the attacking side. In other words, they believe stopping now could make them more vulnerable later. So their position becomes very clear. A temporary ceasefire is not enough. Only a permanent settlement would end the conflict. But here is where the problem becomes almost impossible to solve. Because the two sides are not asking for the same thing. One side wants a pause, the other side wants guarantees. Those are two completely different diplomatic goals. A pause is easy. You stop firing. You step back. You open negotiations. Guarantees are much harder. They require structural changes, security arrangements, international oversight, long-term commitments. sometimes even military withdrawals. And those types of agreements take months or years to negotiate, not days. While diplomats debate these issues, the military reality continues to evolve. Missiles keep launching, air defenses keep activating, and commanders on the ground continue operating under standing orders. This introduces another layer of complexity that many observers overlook. In modern conflicts, political leaders do not always control every battlefield decision in real time. Military units operate under pre-approved strategies designed to maintain pressure even when communication becomes uncertain. That means operations can continue, even while politicians are discussing peace. From the outside, this can look chaotic, but internally it is often deliberate. Command structures are designed this way to prevent sudden vulnerability. If every missile launch required direct political approval, response times would slow dramatically. Instead, operational authority is often distributed throughout the military chain of command. The result is a conflict that develops its own momentum. Diplomats talk, commanders act, and both processes move forward at the same time. Meanwhile, global powers are watching closely. Russia has signaled political support for Iran. China has issued warnings about regional instability. European governments are worried about energy supply disruptions. Every major player sees different risks emerging from the same conflict. Some worry about oil markets, some worry about military credibility, others worry about the possibility of escalation, drawing additional countries into the confrontation, because once alliances become involved, local conflicts can expand rapidly. History is full of examples where regional disputes grew into global crises. That possibility is exactly what diplomats are trying to avoid now, but avoiding escalation requires cooperation, and cooperation requires trust. Right now, trust is in very short supply. Both sides believe the other side will eventually blink first. Both sides believe time favors their strategy. And when both sides hold that belief simultaneously, wars rarely end quickly. Instead, they drift into a prolonged phase where each side tests the other's endurance. Economic endurance, military endurance, political endurance. The longer a conflict continues, the more pressure builds inside each country involved. The citizens begin asking questions, markets react. Political opposition grows louder. Governments start calculating how much longer the situation can continue. At the moment, no one knows exactly where that tipping point will appear. Energy analysts warn that prolonged disruption could push oil prices far higher. Security analysts warn that additional strikes could trigger wider regional involvement. Humanitarian organizations warn that civilian suffering will increase the longer the conflict continues. Every possible outcome carries serious consequences, and yet the fundamental disagreement remains unresolved. What exactly does ceasefire mean? For some leaders, it means stopping temporarily while negotiations begin. For others, it means resolving the underlying conflict before any fighting stops. Those two interpretations cannot coexist for long. Eventually, one side has to shift its position, or a third party has to create a framework that both sides can accept. Historically, that role often falls to international mediators, neutral governments, global institutions, or coalitions of countries trying to stabilize the situation. But mediation only works when both sides believe compromise is possible. At the moment, both sides are still focused on leverage. Each believes continued pressure will improve its negotiating position, so the missiles continue flying, the markets continue reacting, and the rest of the world continues watching closely, because the outcome of this conflict will influence far more than the region where it is happening. It will influence energy prices, global alliances, military doctrines, and the balance of power across the Middle East. For now, the war has entered a phase where perception battles are almost as important as military ones. Every statement, every interview, every televised message, they are all signals sent to audiences around the world, signals meant to shape how the conflict is understood. But beneath those signals, the fundamental reality remains unchanged. Neither side wants to appear weak. Neither side wants to surrender leverage, and neither side believes the other is ready to compromise. History has a name for wars that reach this stage. Wars where both sides believe time will force the other side to give in. Wars where every ceasefire proposal becomes another strategic calculation. Wars where the end is unclear and the costs keep rising. Those wars rarely end quickly, and they almost never end cheaply.